Marcus Chen sat in the back corner of advanced xenobiology, trying to make himself invisible. The classroom was a massive dome with floating seats arranged in concentric circles, each student's position determined by their species' atmospheric requirements. The Xanthari breathed methane and sat in their sealed pods near the ceiling. The aquatic delphinians floated in their water-filled spheres along the middle tier. And down at the bottom, in the standard oxygen section, sat the various humanoid species. Well, mostly humanoid. Marcus was the only actual human in a class of 43 students. As we can see from the genetic analysis, Professor Kethvar announced, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display. Most sentient species developed intelligence as a survival mechanism in hostile environments. The Xanthari evolved on a world with acid storms. The Vorthak survived ice ages that lasted millennia. A few seats away, Zaxthul's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was the insectoid equivalent of laughter. What about humans, Professor? What hostile environment created their intelligence? A world with too much sunshine and fresh water? The class erupted in various forms of alien laughter. The Xanthari made their hissing sounds. The Delphinians clicked their sonar and the other humanoids chuckled in more familiar ways. Marcus felt his cheeks burn red, a distinctly human response that only made the aliens laugh harder. Actually, Professor Kethvar said, his tone diplomatically neutral, Earth was quite hospitable compared to most homeworlds. Perhaps that's why humans develop such optimistic tendencies. Optimistic, repeated Vera Lynn, a tall, blue-skinned Andorian whose people had survived on a planet where the temperature never rose above freezing. Is that what we're calling their naivety now? Marcus gripped his stylus tighter. He'd heard variations of this conversation every day for the past 3 months since arriving at the Galactic Academy. Humans were soft. Humans were weak. Humans came from an easy world and had never really struggled. They were the pampered children of the galaxy, admitted to the Academy more out of political correctness than actual merit. Their homeworld has no natural predators larger than themselves, added Throck, a massive rock-skinned Terran whose people literally ate minerals. No environmental extremes, no scarcity of resources. How does such a species even develop spaceflight? Pure luck, Zaxthul clicked. They probably stumbled into it by accident. Professor Kethvar's scales shifted color slightly. A sign Marcus had learned indicated mild irritation. Perhaps we should focus on the lesson rather than speculation about... I heard, Virulin interrupted, that they still have something called wars on their planet. They actually fight each other instead of working together against real threats. It's almost primitive. Wars over what? Throck rumbled. Surely not resources. Their planet has abundance. Territory, mostly, Zaxthul said, accessing his datapad. Sometimes ideology? Sometimes just because they don't like each other. It's fascinating in a pathological way. Marcus wanted to speak up, to explain that human conflicts were more complex than that, but he'd learned that defending his species only invited more mockery. Besides, how could he explain the intricacies of human nature to beings who had evolved in environments where cooperation wasn't just beneficial? It was the only way to survive. The Xanthari had developed their collective consciousness because lone individuals died in acid storms. The Vorthak shared everything, because hoarding resources during ice ages meant extinction for everyone. The Delphinians evolved echolocation and sonar communication because their dark, deep oceans required perfect coordination to find food. Humans, apparently, had evolved on a world so easy that they had the luxury of fighting among themselves. Professor, called Rixtar, a serpentine Naga whose people had evolved in underground tunnel systems. Is it true that humans have something called entertainment, where they watch other humans pretend to fight? Sports and theater, yes, Professor Kethvar confirmed reluctantly. They watch fake conflicts for fun, Rixtar marveled, when they could be studying or working or preparing for real dangers. Their neural pathways must be fundamentally different, Vera Lynn observed clinically. No other species would waste cognitive resources on pretend scenarios when real learning opportunities exist. Marcus stared at his desk, watching the holographic notes scroll past without reading them. He'd worked harder than anyone to get into the academy. His test scores were higher than half the class. His research proposals had been praised by the admission board. But none of that seemed to matter once his classmates learned he was from the easy world. Speaking of real learning opportunities, Professor Kethvar announced, clearly trying to redirect the conversation. I have an exciting announcement about our upcoming field study. The alien chatter died down as students focused on the professor. The Academy has arranged for our class to take an educational expedition to study primitive ecosystem development. We'll be visiting a Class M planet in the Sol system to observe early-stage biosphere evolution. Marcus looked up, confused. There were no primitive planets in the Sol system anymore. Mars had been terraformed decades ago. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn hosted thriving colonies. Unless... We'll be visiting the third planet, Professor Kethvar continued, the human homeworld, Earth. The class erupted in excited chatter. Several students turned to look at Marcus with expressions ranging from pity to curiosity. A real primitive world. Throck rumbled with satisfaction. Finally, something educational. I've heard their cities are built directly on the ground, Virulin added. No anti-gravity, no atmospheric processors. Just crude structures sitting in the dirt. And they still use wheeled transportation, Zaxthul clicked, instead of proper hovering vehicles. Marcus felt a mix of embarrassment and rising anger. Earth wasn't primitive, it was just different. Human technology had developed along different lines than most galactic species, focused more on efficiency and sustainability than raw power or environmental adaptation. Don't worry, human, Rixtar called out, using the term like it was Marcus's name rather than his species. We promise not to contaminate your backward planet with our advanced technology. More laughter rippled through the class. Marcus clenched his fists under his desk but said nothing. Let them think what they wanted. Let them go to Earth with their preconceptions and their superiority complexes. They had no idea what they were about to encounter. As the class ended and students began filing out, chattering excitedly about the upcoming primitive world expedition, Marcus remained in his seat. Professor Kethvar approached him, his expression sympathetic. I apologize for the class's behavior, the professor said quietly. Some species have difficulty understanding development paths different from their own. Marcus looked up at the four-armed educator. When do we leave for Earth? Next cycle. 3 rotations from today. Kethvar paused. Perhaps you could serve as a cultural guide? Help your classmates understand human society better? Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks, though there was something sharp in the expression. Oh, I think they're going to understand human society just fine, Professor. In fact, I think this field trip is going to be very educational for everyone. As he gathered his materials and headed for the door, Marcus was already planning what his classmates were about to learn about the primitive world of Earth. The Academy transport ship Stellar Wisdom dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and immediately every student crowded around the observation ports. Marcus watched his classmates' reactions with barely contained amusement as they stared at what they expected to be a primitive backwater. Where are the orbital platforms? Virulin asked, pressing her blue face against the transparent aluminum. Maybe they haven't developed orbital technology yet, Zaxthul suggested, his compound eyes scanning the star system, though that would mean their students somehow accessed Academy databases from a planet-bound civilization, which seems impossible. Throck's massive form rumbled with confusion. I detect artificial gravity signatures throughout the system, but the configuration is all wrong. Why would anyone put installations in such inefficient orbital patterns? Professor Kethvar consulted his instruments, his forearms working multiple control panels simultaneously. The human governments did provide flight path coordinates, but they're quite complex. More complex than most civilizations require. Marcus bit back a smile. His classmates were looking at the Sol system through the lens of their own development. Most galactic species had built their space infrastructure for survival. Massive orbital habitats to escape hostile homeworlds, defensive platforms to ward off environmental threats, resource extraction facilities to supplement scarce planetary materials. Humans had built their space infrastructure for expansion. Look at those trajectory patterns, Rixtar observed, his serpentine body coiled around a sensor display. There are thousands of objects moving through this system, but none of them follow standard conservation flight paths. It's like they're not worried about fuel efficiency at all. Wasteful, Virulin declared, typical of a species that never learned proper resource management. As they drew closer to Earth, the confusion only deepened. The planet was surrounded by a glittering web of satellites, space stations, and what appeared to be massive construction projects. But unlike the utilitarian, purely functional structures most species built, these installations seemed almost artistic. What is that? Throck pointed at a massive ring structure orbiting Earth's equator. Marcus glanced at the display. That's the Singapore Orbital. It's a combination space elevator, power collection array, and residential habitat. About 12 million people live there. 12 million? Zaxthol's mandibles clicked in disbelief. On a single station? That's larger than most species' total off-world populations. How do they supply it? Virulin demanded. The resource requirements must be enormous. They don't really need to supply it, Marcus explained casually. It's mostly self-sufficient. Solar collection, asteroid mining, closed-loop agriculture, standard human orbital design. Professor Kethovar looked up from his instruments. Marcus, perhaps you should have mentioned that human space infrastructure was more extensive than our databases suggested. You didn't ask, Marcus replied with a shrug. Besides, I thought you were interested in studying primitive ecosystems. As the transport ship requested landing clearance, more surprises awaited the alien students. Earth Traffic Control didn't just grant permission. They assigned a squadron of escort ships to guide them through the complex web of orbital installations. Are those military vessels? Throck asked nervously as sleek angular ships took formation around their transport. Space Guard, Marcus confirmed. Traffic Control. Sol system has about 50,000 ships moving through it at any given time, so coordination is pretty important. 50,000? Brixitar's voice went up an octave. That's more than the combined space fleets of the Centauri Confederation. Well, humans do a lot of traveling, Marcus said mildly. The escort ships guided them toward North America, and as they descended through Earth's atmosphere, the alien students got their first clear look at human civilization from above. By the eternal storms, Virulin whispered, her blue skin paling even further. Look at the size of those cities. Sprawling megalopolises stretched across continents, their lights visible even in daylight. But these weren't the cramped vertical structures most species built to conserve space and resources. Human cities spread outward in organic patterns with green spaces, waterways, and transportation networks woven throughout. It's like they're not even trying to be efficient, Zaxthol observed. Look at all that wasted space. Parks, recreational areas, decorative architecture. Why would they waste precious urban real estate on non-functional aesthetics? Throck rumbled. Marcus looked at his classmates' confused faces. They were seeing Earth through the eyes of species that had evolved to survive in harsh environments where every resource was precious. Every space had to serve a vital function, and beauty was a luxury no one could afford. Humans had evolved on a world abundant enough that they could afford to care about things other than pure survival. They're not trying to be efficient, Marcus said quietly. They're trying to be human. The transport landed at Denver Spaceport, and as the students disembarked, they were greeted by Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's liaison to the Galactic Academy. Welcome to Earth, she said warmly, switching between several alien languages as she addressed different students. I'm Dr. Martinez, and I'll be your guide during your stay. Virulin stepped forward, apparently designated as the class spokesperson. Dr. Martinez, we're here to study primitive ecosystem development. Professor Kethovar indicated this planet was suitable for observing early-stage biosphere evolution. Dr. Martinez blinked, then glanced at Marcus, who was trying very hard not to laugh. I see. Well, Earth's biosphere is quite complex, but I suppose we can arrange some ecological observation opportunities. What specifically were you hoping to study? Simple organism interactions, Throck said. Basic predator-prey relationships, elementary adaptive behaviors, resource competition in scarcity environments, Zaxthol added. Survival strategies in hostile conditions, Rixtar continued. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. I think we can accommodate those interests. Though I should mention, Earth's ecosystem might be somewhat more sophisticated than you're expecting. How sophisticated could it be? Virulin asked dismissively. It's a Class M world with abundant resources and mild environmental conditions. The evolutionary pressures must have been minimal. Well, Dr. Martinez said diplomatically, why don't we start with a tour of the spaceport area? And then we can work our way up to more complex ecosystems. As they walked through the terminal, the alien students gawked at everything around them. The building itself was a marvel of engineering, that somehow managed to be both massively functional and aesthetically beautiful. Soaring arches of transparent metal rose hundreds of meters overhead, filled with hanging gardens and flowing water features. "This is a transportation hub?" Vera Lynn asked incredulously. "One of about 200 on the continent," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "We process roughly 3 million passengers a day through this facility." 3 million daily passengers? Professor Kethavar repeated faintly. "From a single facility. On a planet you describe as having minimal spaceflight development." Marcus couldn't hold back his grin anymore. "I never said we had minimal spaceflight development. I just never corrected anyone when they assumed we did." As they walked toward the exit, passing shops, restaurants, art galleries, and what appeared to be a small concert venue, Thruck voiced the question they were all thinking. "If your civilization is this advanced, why didn't you correct our assumptions? Why let us think you were primitive?" Marcus paused at the terminal's main entrance, looking out at the sprawling cityscape beyond, where maglev trains glided silently between towers that seemed to grow from the earth like metallic trees, where the sky was filled with personal aircraft and delivery drones, where millions of humans went about their daily lives in a civilization built not just for survival, but for joy. "Because," he said simply, "I wanted you to see it for yourselves. I wanted you to understand what happens when a species evolves on a world abundant enough that they can afford to dream." The tour bus was unlike anything the alien students had ever seen. Instead of the cramped utilitarian transport vehicles common throughout the galaxy, this was a comfortable, spacious vehicle with panoramic windows, climate control, and individual entertainment systems for each passenger. "This is public transportation?" Rickster asked, his serpentine form coiled comfortably across 2 seats designed to accommodate various body types. "Regional transit," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "We'll be taking the scenic route to the Rocky Mountain Research Center. It's about a 2-hour journey so you can relax and observe the landscape." As the bus pulled away from the spaceport, the alien students pressed against the windows, watching the human city roll past. What they saw challenged every assumption they'd made about human civilization. The roads were works of art in themselves, curving gracefully through landscaped corridors where native plants and trees had been carefully preserved and integrated into the urban design. Instead of the sterile, purely functional architecture most galactic species favored, human buildings seemed to grow organically from their surroundings. "Those structures," Vera Lynn pointed at a cluster of residential towers that twisted skyward like crystalline trees. "They're completely inefficient. Look at all that wasted space in the spiral design." "Actually," Dr. Martinez said gently, "the spiral design maximizes natural light exposure for every apartment while minimizing the building's environmental footprint. Each unit gets optimal solar gain and natural ventilation." "But why does that matter?" Thruck rumbled. "Surely you have artificial lighting and climate control systems." "We do, but humans prefer natural light and air circulation when possible. It improves psychological well-being and reduces energy consumption." Zaxthol's compound eyes focused on a group of humans jogging along a dedicated path beside the road. "What are those humans doing? Are they fleeing from something?" Dr. Martinez followed his gaze and smiled. "They're exercising, running for fitness and recreation." Recreation? The concept seemed to short-circuit Zaxthol's understanding. "They're expending energy. For fun? Physical activity releases endorphins that improve mood and mental function. Plus, many humans find running meditative or socially enjoyable." Professor Kethavar looked up from his notepad where he'd been frantically scribbling observations. "Dr. Martinez, I'm beginning to suspect our academic briefings about human civilization may have been somewhat incomplete." "What exactly were you told?" she asked diplomatically. "That Earth was a primitive world suitable for studying early ecosystem development," Vera Lynn said. "We were led to believe human technology was rudimentary at best." Dr. Martinez glanced at Marcus, who was watching the conversation with obvious amusement. "Marcus, would you like to explain?" "Not really," Marcus said cheerfully. "I'm enjoying watching them figure it out themselves." As they left the city proper and entered the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, the landscape became even more confusing to the alien students. This wasn't the untamed wilderness they'd expected to find on a primitive world. Instead, they saw a carefully managed ecosystem where human technology had been seamlessly integrated with natural systems. "Are those solar collectors?" Rickstar pointed at what appeared to be a grove of metallic trees. Biomimetic solar arrays, Dr. Martinez confirmed. They're designed to look like the native aspen trees while collecting solar energy and providing habitat for local wildlife. Each installation generates enough power for about 50 homes while maintaining the natural aesthetic of the forest. But why disguise them? Virulin asked. Wouldn't exposed collectors be more efficient?
Slightly, but humans value the visual harmony of their environment.
We found that people are happier and more productive when their technology blends with natural beauty rather than dominating it. Throck's rocky features screwed up in confusion. Your species makes technological decisions based on happiness? Among other factors, yes. As they climbed higher into the mountains, they passed what appeared to be a massive construction site, where hundreds of humans were working with advanced machinery to build something into the mountainside itself. What's that project? Professor Kethvar asked. The Continental Tunnel Network, Dr. Martinez explained. We're connecting all major cities in North America with high-speed maglev trains that travel through vacuum tubes. The journey from New York to Los Angeles will take about 45 minutes when it's complete. 45 minutes? Zaxthul's mandibles clicked rapidly. Across an entire continent? The tubes maintain near vacuum conditions, so there's almost no air resistance. The trains can reach speeds of about 3,000 kilometers per hour. Virulin stared at the construction site. The engineering complexity must be enormous. How many decades will this take to complete? Actually, we're ahead of schedule. The whole network should be operational within 18 months. 18 months? Professor Kethvar's scales shifted through several colors. For a project of that magnitude? How is that possible? Marcus finally spoke up. Because humans don't just build things to work. We build them to work well, to look good, and to make people happy. When you're motivated by more than just survival, you tend to get creative about solutions. The bus crested a ridge, and suddenly the alien students could see down into a vast valley where something impossible was happening. Thousands of humans were engaged in what appeared to be organized recreational activities. There were sports fields, swimming pools, climbing walls, and areas where people were simply lying on blankets enjoying the sunshine. What is this place? Rickster asked in bewilderment. Boulder Valley Recreation Area, Dr. Martinez said. It's one of our regional parks. About 50,000 people visit here on a typical weekend. They travel here just to play? Virulin's voice had risen to a higher pitch. Play, relax, socialize, exercise, enjoy nature. Humans have a biological need for recreation and social interaction. Throck pointed at a group of humans who appeared to be deliberately climbing a sheer rock face. Are those individuals in distress? Do they require rescue?
Rock climbing.
It's a popular recreational activity. They're risking injury for no survival benefit, Zaxthul observed clinically. The benefit isn't survival. It's personal growth, physical challenge, and the satisfaction of overcoming obstacles. Many humans find that pushing their physical and mental limits in controlled, voluntary situations makes them stronger and more confident in all aspects of life. Professor Kethvar was writing so rapidly his stylus was smoking. This is extraordinary. A species that deliberately seeks out challenges even when survival is not threatened. The psychological implications are staggering. As they descended into the valley, they passed a large group of young humans who appeared to be learning to play musical instruments in an outdoor setting. Music education, Dr. Martinez explained before anyone could ask. Those are children learning violin, cello, and piano. Music training improves cognitive development and emotional intelligence. You teach your young non-survival skills? Virulin asked. We teach them everything we can. Art, music, literature, philosophy, multiple languages, various sports, scientific methods, creative problem solving. The goal isn't just to help them survive, it's to help them become full, complete individuals who can contribute to society and find personal fulfillment. Personal fulfillment. Rickstar repeated the phrase as if it were a foreign concept, which Marcus realized it essentially was. The bus pulled into the Rocky Mountain Research Center, and as the students disembarked, they found themselves facing a facility that challenged everything they thought they knew about human technology. The building seemed to grow from the mountainside itself, its bioadaptive architecture shifting and responding to environmental conditions in real time. Welcome to the center, Dr. Martinez said. This is where we'll be studying Earth's primitive ecosystem. I think you're going to find it quite educational. Marcus watched his classmates stare at the research facility with growing comprehension, and something that might have been embarrassment. They were beginning to understand that they'd made some very significant assumptions about humanity, and they hadn't even seen the really impressive stuff yet. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the director of the Rocky Mountain Research Center, greeted them in the main atrium with an enthusiasm that seemed to make the alien students uncomfortable. Most galactic species approached new contacts with formal protocols and careful distance. Dr. Vasquez approached them like she was meeting interesting new friends. "You must be the academy students," she said warmly, shaking hands with those who had appendages suitable for handshaking and offering alternative greetings to the others. "I'm so excited to share our work with you. We don't often get visitors from other star systems." Professor Kethvar stepped forward, clearly struggling to reconcile the advanced facility around them with his expectations. "Dr. Vasquez, we were told this was a center for studying primitive ecosystems." "Oh, it is," she said brightly. "Though I suppose primitive depends on your perspective. We study ecosystem development, restoration, and enhancement. Come on, let me show you what we're working on." As they walked through the facility, the alien students were bombarded with concepts that didn't fit their understanding of how civilizations developed. The research center wasn't just studying Earth's ecosystem, it was actively improving it. "This is our genetic restoration lab," Dr. Vasquez explained, leading them into a vast chamber filled with complex equipment. "We're bringing back extinct species using preserved DNA and advanced cloning techniques." "Bringing back extinct species?" Vera Lynn asked. "Why would you waste resources on organisms that proved unfit for survival?" Dr. Vasquez paused, clearly taken aback by the question. "Because they're part of Earth's natural heritage. Their extinction was often caused by human activity, so we have a responsibility to restore them when possible." "Responsibility to extinct organisms?" Throck rumbled in confusion. "That doesn't serve any survival function." "No, but it serves an ethical function," Dr. Vasquez said gently. "Humans believe we have moral obligations that extend beyond our immediate survival needs." She led them to a viewing window where they could see into a habitat containing what appeared to be massive, shaggy creatures with long curved tusks. "Woolly mammoths," she said proudly. "Extinct for 4,000 years until we brought them back. They're helping to restore Arctic grasslands and combat climate change by trampling down snow cover and exposing permafrost to cold air." Zaxthel's compound eyes focused on the creatures. "You're using extinct megafauna for terraforming?" "Ecosystem restoration," Dr. Vasquez corrected. "We're not trying to change the planet into something new. We're trying to help it return to its natural state." "But why?" Rixtar asked, genuine confusion in his serpentine features. "If your civilization is advanced enough for genetic reconstruction, surely you could simply engineer the climate to your specifications." "We could," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "But humans prefer to work with natural systems rather than replacing them. We've found that nature's solutions are often more elegant and sustainable than artificial ones." Professor Kethvar was frantically taking notes. "This is unprecedented. A species that deliberately chooses less efficient methods for philosophical reasons." "Not less efficient," Marcus interjected. "More sustainable. There's a difference." They moved on to the Climate Modeling Center, where massive holographic displays showed real-time data from monitoring stations across the globe. "We track every aspect of Earth's climate system," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Temperature, humidity, wind patterns, ocean currents, atmospheric composition, solar radiation absorption. This data helps us predict and prevent potential climate disruptions." "How do you prevent climate disruption?" Vera Lynn asked. "Multiple methods. Carbon sequestration, atmospheric processing, ocean alkalinization, solar radiation management, but mostly by changing human behavior to work with natural systems instead of against them." Throck stared at the global climate display. "Your species monitors and manages the climate of an entire planet?" "We have to," Dr. Vasquez said simply. "We're the only species on Earth capable of global-scale environmental impact, so we're responsible for global-scale environmental stewardship." "Stewardship," Zaxthel repeated. "You see yourselves as caretakers of your world?" "Of course. Where else would we live?" They entered the biodiversity lab, where hundreds of researchers were working to catalog and preserve genetic information from every species on Earth. "We're creating a comprehensive genetic library of all Earth life," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Every plant, animal, fungus, and microorganism. If any species faces extinction, we'll have the genetic information needed to restore it." How many species are you cataloging? Professor Kethvar asked. Currently about 8.5 million identified species with an estimated 15 to 20 million total. We should have complete genetic profiles for everything within the next decade. Vera Lynn sat down abruptly on a nearby bench. 20 million species. You're preserving genetic information for 20 million species. Well, we haven't found them all yet, Dr. Vasquez said modestly. New species are discovered every day. Just last week we found a new type of orchid in the Amazon that produces compounds useful for treating neural disorders. And you do this for what purpose? Rickstar asked weakly. Because every species represents millions of years of evolutionary development. Each one might hold solutions to problems we haven't even discovered yet. Plus, biodiversity makes ecosystems more stable and resilient. They visited the Atmospheric Engineering Division, where scientists were working on projects that boggled the alien students' minds. Not because the technology was beyond their understanding, but because the scale of human ambition seemed unlimited. We're developing atmospheric processors for Mars colonization, Dr. Vasquez explained casually. The goal is to create a breathable atmosphere within 50 years. You're terraforming other planets? Professor Kethavar's voice cracked slightly. Mars, Venus, 3 moons of Jupiter, 2 moons of Saturn, and we're investigating possibilities in the Alpha Centauri system. Humans like to have options, but why? Throck asked. You have a perfectly habitable world here. Because exploration and expansion are fundamental to human nature, Dr. Vasquez said. We're curious about what's out there, and we want to ensure the long-term survival of human civilization by establishing multiple self-sufficient colonies. As they walked through the facility, Marcus watched his classmates struggle to process what they were seeing. They'd come expecting to study a primitive world with simple life forms and basic survival strategies. Instead, they were discovering a civilization that had moved far beyond mere survival to pursue goals that most galactic species couldn't even comprehend. Dr. Vasquez, Vera Lynn said slowly, how long has your species had space travel capability? Depends how you define it. We first left our planet about 70 years ago, achieved reliable orbital flight about 60 years ago, established permanent off-world colonies about 40 years ago, and developed faster-than-light travel about 15 years ago. 15 years? Saxthul's mandibles clicked rapidly. You've had FTL capability for only 15 years and you're already terraforming multiple worlds? Humans are impatient, Dr. Vasquez said with a smile. When we decide we want something, we tend to pursue it aggressively. Professor Kethvar looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. Your species accomplished in 70 years what most civilizations take millennia to achieve. Marcus shrugged. Like Dr. Vasquez said, we're impatient. Also, we tend to think big. But how is such rapid development possible? Vera Lynn demanded. Dr. Vasquez considered the question seriously. I think it's because humans have always been motivated by more than just survival. We're driven by curiosity, creativity, the desire to explore and create and improve things. When your goals go beyond simply staying alive, you tend to find innovative solutions. As they prepared to leave the research center, Throck asked the question that had been building throughout their visit. Dr. Vasquez, if human civilization is this advanced, why do galactic databases classify Earth as a primitive world, suitable only for basic ecosystem study? Dr. Vasquez glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Because, she said gently, most galactic species measure advancement purely in terms of survival technology. How well can you adapt to hostile environments? How efficiently can you extract resources from barren worlds? How completely can you control your environment? Humans measure advancement differently. We ask, how much beauty can we create? How many problems can we solve? How much can we explore and discover? How well can we care for our world and each other? By galactic standards, we're primitive because we waste resources on art, recreation, and environmental protection. By human standards, a civilization that only focuses on survival has missed the point of being alive. As they boarded the bus for the journey back to the spaceport, the alien students were unusually quiet. They'd come to study primitive life forms and had instead encountered a civilization that challenged their fundamental assumptions about development, progress, and the purpose of intelligence itself. And Marcus was just getting started showing them what humans could do. The next morning, Dr. Martinez had a surprise waiting for the alien students in the hotel lobby. I've arranged for you to observe human society in its natural state, she announced. Today you'll be participating in what humans call a festival. Festival? Professor Kethvar consulted his translation device. A periodic celebration involving music, food, and social gathering? Exactly. The Denver Arts and Innovation Festival. About 200,000 people attend over 3 days. Vera Lynn's blue skin paled further. 200,000 individuals gathering voluntarily.
For what purpose?
To celebrate human creativity, share new ideas, and enjoy each other's company. As their transport approached the festival grounds, the alien students could see crowds of humans streaming toward a vast area filled with colorful structures, performance stages, and what appeared to be elaborate art installations. This looks like controlled chaos, Rickstar observed. His serpentine form coiled nervously. That's not far from accurate, Dr. Martinez laughed. Humans are very good at organized chaos. The moment they entered the festival grounds, the alien students were overwhelmed by sensory input. Music filled the air from multiple stages, but instead of being cacophonous, the different performances seemed to complement each other. Humans moved through the crowds with purpose but without hurry, stopping to examine art installations, sample food from dozens of vendors, and engage in animated conversations with complete strangers. They're not afraid of each other, Throck rumbled in amazement, watching children run freely between adults while parents chatted casually with people they'd obviously just met. Why would they be afraid? Dr. Martinez asked. Crowded conditions, limited resources, territorial competition. Zaxthul listed off the standard concerns. Large gatherings should create stress and conflict. Look around, Marcus said. Do you see anyone fighting over resources? The alien students observed more carefully. Vendors were giving away free samples of food and drinks. Artists were demonstrating their techniques and teaching skills to anyone who showed interest. Musicians were collaborating spontaneously, creating new songs with people they'd never met before. This is impossible, Virulin stated flatly. No species shares resources freely with strangers. It violates basic survival instincts. Unless you live in a society abundant enough that sharing doesn't threaten survival, Marcus pointed out. They paused at a large stage where a human woman was giving a presentation about something called vertical farming. Using advanced hydroponic systems and LED grow lights, we can produce 40 times more food per square meter than traditional agriculture, using 95% less water and 0 pesticides, she was explaining to a rapt audience. She's sharing advanced agricultural technology publicly? Professor Kethvar asked in disbelief. Open source innovation, Dr. Martinez explained. Humans believe that sharing knowledge makes everyone stronger. But doesn't that eliminate competitive advantage? Zaxthul clicked. Humans have learned that cooperation often produces better results than competition, Dr. Martinez said. When everyone benefits, everyone prospers. They moved on to an area where children and adults were working together to build elaborate structures out of recycled materials. What are they constructing? Throk asked. Nothing specific, Dr. Martinez said. It's collaborative art. They're building whatever they imagine together. With no predetermined goal or functional purpose? Vera Lynn asked. The purpose is creativity, cooperation, and fun. Rickstar watched a group of human children convince several adults to help them build what appeared to be a giant sculpture of a dragon. The young are directing the adults' activities? Human children are encouraged to express their creativity and take leadership roles when they show initiative, even though they lack experience and knowledge. Because they have imagination and enthusiasm, Dr. Martinez corrected. Adults provide technical expertise, but children provide innovative thinking that adults sometimes lose. They came to a section called Innovation Alley, where humans were demonstrating new technologies and inventions. But instead of trying to sell or profit from their creations, they were sharing them freely and asking for feedback and collaboration. I've developed a new water purification system using bioengineered algae, one presenter was explaining. The plans are open source and I'm looking for partners to help implement it in regions that need clean water. He's giving away potentially valuable technology, Thruk observed. Because clean water is more important than profit, the presenter overheard and responded directly. Technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. Virulin stared at the human. But how do you benefit if you don't profit from your innovations? I benefit when more people have access to clean water. I benefit when other innovators improve my designs. I benefit from living in a world where cooperation and sharing are valued more than individual accumulation. At the next booth, a team of teenagers was demonstrating something called atmospheric processing drones that could clean air pollution in real time. How long did it take you to develop this technology? Professor Kethover asked them. About 6 months, one of the teenagers replied casually. We started it as a school project, but then we realized it could actually help with the air quality problems in manufacturing districts. 6 months? Zaxthul's compound eyes focused intently. You're students, not professional researchers. Human education encourages practical problem-solving, Dr. Martinez explained. Students are expected to work on real-world challenges as part of their learning process. Children are conducting advanced scientific research? Vera Lynn asked faintly. Children, teenagers, adults, elderly humans, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Innovation isn't limited by age in human society. They watched as a group of elderly humans demonstrated a communication system they'd developed for interacting with Earth's dolphins and whales. We've made significant progress in establishing two-way communication, one of the elderly inventors explained. The cetaceans have been very patient teachers. You're communicating with non-sentient species? Rickster asked. Dolphins and whales are highly intelligent, the inventor corrected. Just because they don't build technology doesn't mean they're not sentient. They have complex social structures, cultural traditions, and sophisticated problem-solving abilities. And you study them for what purpose? To learn from them. And because understanding other forms of intelligence makes us better at understanding our own. As they walked through the festival, the alien students encountered concept after concept that challenged their worldview. Humans who had dedicated their lives to preserving endangered insects. Artists who created beautiful sculptures from space debris. Musicians who composed symphonies based on the mathematical patterns of stellar formation. This is a civilization that has moved beyond survival concerns, Professor Kethvar muttered, his scales cycling through colors rapidly as he tried to process what he was observing. Not moved beyond, Marcus corrected. Expanded beyond. Humans still care about survival. But we've learned that survival without purpose isn't really living. They paused at a stage where a human philosopher was giving a presentation called The Ethics of Galactic Expansion. As we move out into the galaxy and encounter other civilizations, the philosopher was saying, we must remember that intelligence comes in many forms. Our goal should not be to impose human values on other species, but to learn from the diversity of consciousness and find ways to cooperate that benefit everyone. Even humans understand the importance of galactic cooperation. Throck rumbled approvingly. Actually, Marcus said quietly, I think humans might understand it better than most species. How can you say that? Vera Lynn demanded. You fight wars among yourselves. We fight wars, yes. But we also end them. We make peace. We forgive enemies and turn them into allies. We learn from our conflicts and find better ways to resolve differences. Marcus gestured at the festival around them. Look at this gathering. 200,000 humans from dozens of different cultures, ethnicities, religions, and political beliefs, all sharing space peacefully and celebrating together. Most galactic species can barely tolerate members of other subspecies. As the day wore on, the alien students found themselves reluctantly impressed by what they were seeing. This wasn't the primitive, resource-wasting civilization they'd expected. This was a species that had solved the basic challenges of survival so thoroughly that they could focus their considerable intelligence and creativity on bigger questions. How to live well, how to create beauty, how to explore the unknown, how to cooperate rather than merely compete, how to build a civilization that enhanced not just human life, but all life. As they prepared to leave the festival, Zaxthul asked the question that had been bothering him all day. Dr. Martinez, if human civilization is this advanced and sophisticated, why are you tolerating the way galactic society treats you? Why do you allow other species to consider you primitive? Dr. Martinez smiled. Because proving you're not primitive by showing off your weapons and demanding respect is exactly the kind of primitive behavior we're trying to move beyond. We'd rather demonstrate our advancement through our actions and let others come to their own conclusions. On their final day on Earth, Dr. Martinez had arranged what she called the big reveal. Today you'll see what humans do when we're really trying, she announced, as they boarded a much larger transport than they'd used before. Where are we going? Professor Kethover asked, noting that their flight path was taking them away from Earth. Luna City, Marcus said, unable to keep the pride out of his voice. Our moon base. You have a base on your satellite? Virulin asked. We have a city on our satellite, Dr. Martinez corrected. As they approached Luna, the alien students pressed against the viewing ports in stunned silence. What they saw wasn't a small research outpost or mining facility like most species established on airless worlds. What they saw was a gleaming metropolis that stretched across the lunar surface like a crystal web. How many humans live there? Throck rumbled. About 3 million permanent residents, Dr. Martinez said casually, plus another million in rotating populations for work assignments and tourism. Tourism? Zaxthol's mandibles clicked rapidly. Humans traveled to an airless moon for recreation. Low-gravity sports are very popular, Marcus explained. Plus the view of Earth is spectacular. Luna City was unlike anything in galactic civilization. Instead of the buried, heavily shielded structures most species built on airless worlds, the human city was a marvel of transparent domes and soaring spires that seemed to defy the moon's low gravity. Aren't you concerned about meteor impacts? Rixtar asked as they descended toward the city's spaceport. The dome shields can deflect anything smaller than a kilometer, Dr. Martinez explained, and we track all larger objects in Earth-Luna space. You monitor the entire orbital space around your homeworld? Professor Kethvar asked. Of course. Asteroid impacts are one of the few threats that could seriously damage Earth's biosphere. So we track everything and have contingency plans for deflecting or destroying any object that poses a risk. As they disembarked at Luna City Spaceport, the alien students found themselves in a vast atrium filled with earth plants and the sound of flowing water. Somehow, the humans had created an environment that felt natural and comfortable, despite being on an airless moon. Welcome to Luna City, their guide announced. She was a young human woman named Captain Sarah Chen, who wore what appeared to be a military uniform. I'm Captain Chen, Earth Space Force. I'll be showing you around our operations here. Space Force? Virulin asked. Humanity's space-based military and exploration branch, Captain Chen explained. We handle everything from asteroid defense to deep space exploration to contact protocols with other civilizations. Contact protocols? Professor Kethvar asked. Procedures for first contact situations, diplomatic protocols for interaction with alien species, translation systems, cultural exchange programs. We've been preparing for galactic contact for decades. Marcus watched his classmates exchange glances. They were beginning to realize that humanity's entry into galactic civilization hadn't been the random accident they'd assumed. Captain Chen led them through Luna City, and with each stop, the alien students became more overwhelmed by the scope of human achievements. The industrial district contained manufacturing facilities that produced everything from starship components to terraforming equipment. The scale of production was staggering. How much industrial capacity do you have here? Thruk asked, staring at assembly lines that stretched beyond the horizon. Luna City produces about 60% of humanity's space-based infrastructure, Captain Chen replied. Ships, habitats, mining equipment, orbital platforms. The low gravity and lack of atmosphere make it ideal for constructing large structures. The research quarter housed laboratories that were working on projects that boggled the alien students' minds. Faster-than-light communication systems, dimensional engineering, something called consciousness transfer technology. What is consciousness transfer? Rixtar asked nervously. Digital preservation of human consciousness, the lead researcher explained. We're developing ways to back up and transfer human minds into different substrates. Biological, mechanical, or quantum. You're trying to achieve immortality? Virulin asked. We're trying to ensure that human knowledge, experience, and personality can survive any catastrophe, the researcher corrected. Death is the ultimate waste of resources from a civilization perspective. The military quarter showcased defensive systems that made the alien students deeply uncomfortable. Not because they were primitive, but because they were so advanced that they redefined what defensive capability meant. This is our planetary defense grid, Captain Chen explained, showing them a holographic display of the Sol system. We can detect and intercept threats from any direction within a radius of 50 light-years. 50 light-years? Professor Kethavar's voice cracked. That's early warning capability beyond anything in galactic civilization. Humans believe in being prepared, Captain Chen said simply. What exactly are you preparing for? Zaxthol asked. Anything that might threaten Earth or human civilization. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, hostile alien contact, rogue AI, dimensional incursions, temporal anomalies. We've identified about 300 potential existential threats and developed contingency plans for all of them. Virulin sat down heavily on a nearby bench. 300 existential threats? Most species identify maybe 20. Most species evolved in environments where they had to focus on immediate, obvious dangers. Captain Chen said, humans evolved in an environment stable enough that we could afford to think about unlikely, but catastrophic possibilities. They visited the Deep Space Monitoring Station, where humans were mapping the galaxy in detail that surpassed anything in the galactic databases. We've cataloged about 40 million star systems within a 1,000 light-year radius, the station commander explained, including detailed surveys of any systems that might harbor life. 40 million systems? Professor Kethavar asked faintly. We're thorough, the commander said with a shrug. The spaceport showed them the true scale of human space operations. Hundreds of ships came and went every hour, ranging from small personal craft to massive cargo vessels to sleek exploration ships that were obviously designed for long-range missions. How many ships does humanity operate? Throck asked. About 50,000 at last count, Captain Chen replied, though that number increases every month. 50,000 ships, Rickstar repeated weakly. We told you humans like to travel, Marcus said with a grin, but it was their final stop that truly broke the alien students' preconceptions. Captain Chen led them to an observation deck that looked out over the lunar far side, where something impossible was under construction. What is that? Virulin whispered, staring at a structure that stretched across hundreds of kilometers of lunar surface. The Generation Ship Construction Facility, Captain Chen said proudly. We're building ships capable of carrying entire human populations to other star systems. Other star systems? Professor Kethavar asked. Why would you need population transport to other systems? Because humans don't believe in putting all their eggs in one basket, Captain Chen explained. No matter how well we protect Earth and Sol system, there's always a chance that something could threaten human survival here. Generation ships ensure that human civilization can survive anywhere in the galaxy. How many are you building? Zaxthul asked. This facility will produce about 1 ship per year, with each ship capable of transporting 10 million people and establishing a complete human civilization at the destination. We're planning to launch the first one within 5 years. 10 million people per ship? Throck's voice had dropped to a whisper. Complete with agricultural systems, manufacturing capability, genetic banks, cultural archives, and everything needed to build a new human world from scratch. As they stood looking out at the massive construction project, Virulin finally asked the question that had been building all week. Why didn't you tell us any of this at the academy? Why did you let us think you were primitive? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the generation ship taking shape under the Earth's blue light. Because, he said finally, I wanted you to learn something important. All of you come from species that developed in harsh environments. You learned to survive by being tough, by fighting for resources, by building the strongest defenses and the most efficient systems. And that's valuable. That's important. But humans learned something else. We learned that once you've solved the basic problems of survival, you can start working on the harder problems. How to live well. How to create beauty. How to explore the impossible. How to cooperate instead of just compete. Most galactic species think strength means the ability to survive. Humans think strength means the ability to help others thrive. He turned to face his classmates. I wanted you to see that before you decided what humanity was worth. As they prepared to return to Earth and then to the academy, the alien students were unusually quiet. They had come to study primitive ecosystems and had instead discovered a civilization that challenged everything they thought they knew about development, progress, and the purpose of intelligence. And Marcus was pretty sure they would never look at humans or themselves the same way again. 3 weeks later, Marcus walked into advanced xenobiology class to find a very different atmosphere waiting for him. Instead of the usual whispered jokes and dismissive glances, his classmates looked up with something approaching respect when he entered. Professor Kethavar was at his lectern, preparing for the day's lesson. But the real change was in how the other students positioned themselves. For the first time since Marcus had started attending the academy, no one tried to avoid sitting near him. Marcus, Virulin called out as he made his way to his usual back corner seat. Would you sit with us today? We have some questions about human social development. Marcus paused, surprised. Virulin had been one of his harshest critics, often leading the mockery about human primitiveness. Now she was asking for his input with what sounded like genuine curiosity. Sure, he said, taking a seat in the main section of the classroom for the first time all semester. Professor Kethvar began the day's lesson, but it was clear that everyone's attention was elsewhere. Finally, Zaxthul interrupted with a question that had obviously been on his mind since their return from Earth. Professor, our textbooks describe evolutionary development as a response to environmental pressure. Species develop intelligence and technology to overcome threats and resource scarcity. But human development seems to contradict this model. How so? Professor Kethvar asked, though Marcus suspected the professor knew exactly where this was going. Humans developed on a world with minimal environmental pressure, abundant resources, and few existential threats. According to our models, such conditions should produce a species with limited technological development and simple social structures. Yet we observed the opposite, Virulin added. Human technology and social complexity far exceed what our models predict for their environmental conditions. Throck rumbled his agreement. Their achievements in such a short time span suggest an accelerated development pattern that our theories cannot explain. Professor Kethvar looked at Marcus. Perhaps our human student could offer some insight into this apparent contradiction. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being asked for his expertise, rather than being dismissed as primitive. It was a strange feeling, but not an unwelcome one. I think the contradiction comes from assuming that environmental pressure is the only driver of development, Marcus said carefully. Humans had a different kind of pressure. What kind? Rixtar asked, his serpentine form coiled attentively. The pressure to understand. When you don't have to spend all your time just surviving, you start asking bigger questions. Why are we here? What else is possible? What can we create? What can we discover? But those questions don't serve survival functions, Zaxthul pointed out. No, but they serve something more important than survival, Marcus replied. They serve the drive to make existence meaningful. Virulin leaned forward. During our visit to Earth, we observed humans investing enormous resources in activities that provide no survival benefit. Art, music, philosophy, recreational activities. Why would an intelligent species deliberately waste resources? Because they're not wasted if they make life worth living, Marcus said. Survival is just the beginning. Once you've solved the problem of staying alive, you can work on the problem of what to do with life. Professor Kethvar was taking notes rapidly. This suggests an entirely different development paradigm. Most species develop technology to overcome environmental challenges. Humans develop technology to expand possibilities. That's exactly right, Marcus said, warming to the subject. When your world doesn't force you to focus on survival, you can focus on growth instead. Throck's rocky features arranged themselves into what might have been contemplation. This explains the scale of human projects we observed. You're not just trying to ensure survival, you're trying to maximize potential. Which is why humans are building generation ships even though Earth is perfectly habitable, Rixtar added. And why you're terraforming multiple worlds simultaneously. You're not fleeing danger. You're creating opportunities. And why you share technology freely instead of hoarding it for competitive advantage, Virulin continued. When the goal is to maximize collective potential rather than individual survival, cooperation becomes more valuable than competition. Professor Kethvar looked up from his notes. Class, I believe we need to seriously reconsider our fundamental assumptions about technological and social development. The human model suggests that abundance-driven evolution may produce very different results than scarcity-driven evolution. Different and arguably superior, Zaxthul said quietly. In just 70 years of space travel, humans have achieved more galactic expansion than most species accomplish in millennia. Not superior, Marcus corrected gently. Different. Every species develops according to their world and their needs. Xanthari collective consciousness works perfectly for survival in acid storms. Forthak resource-sharing protocols are ideal for Ice Age survival. Human curiosity-driven development works for abundant worlds. But human development seems more adaptable, Virulin observed. We watched humans work with radically different environments and species. They seemed comfortable with change and complexity in ways that most species are not. That's because change and complexity are interesting to humans rather than threatening, Marcus explained. When survival isn't constantly at stake, uncertainty becomes exciting instead of terrifying. Throck made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. So humans explore the galaxy not because they're fleeing their homeworld, but because they're curious about what's out there. Exactly. Earth isn't a launching pad, it's home base. Humans aren't trying to escape their world. They're trying to expand their world. Professor Kethvar stood up abruptly, his scales shifting through rapid color changes that indicated intense thought. "Class," he announced, "I'm going to make an unusual request. I want each of you to revise your final research projects to examine how your understanding of development and intelligence has changed after our Earth expedition." "Professor," Rixtar said slowly, "are you asking us to challenge the fundamental assumptions of xenobiological development theory?" "I'm asking you to think like scientists," Professor Kethvar replied. "When observations contradict theory, we examine our theories, not dismiss our observations." As the class period ended, Marcus found himself surrounded by classmates who wanted to continue the discussion. "Marcus," Virulin said, "would you be willing to help me understand human diplomatic protocols? My people might benefit from learning human cooperation strategies." "I'd like to study human educational methods," Zaxthul added. "The idea of encouraging creative problem-solving in young individuals is fascinating. Human environmental management techniques could help my homeworld," Throck rumbled. "We've focused so much on survival that we've neglected ecosystem health." As they walked out of the classroom together, chatting animatedly about everything they'd observed on Earth, Marcus felt a satisfaction deeper than simple vindication. His classmates weren't just respecting humans now. They were learning from humans. And in the process, they were questioning their own assumptions about development, progress, and the purpose of civilization. "You know," Virulin said as they reached the corridor junction where they would part ways, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We judged your species based on our own limited perspective." "No apology needed," Marcus said genuinely. "Every species sees the galaxy through the lens of their own experience. The important thing is being willing to learn new perspectives." "Is that a human philosophy?" Zaxthul asked. Marcus grinned. "Actually, that's a human hope. We hope that all intelligent species can learn to see beyond their own experience and find common ground with others who are different." As he walked toward his next class, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. He'd gone from being the primitive student from the backward world to being recognized as a representative of one of the galaxy's most innovative civilizations. But more importantly, his classmates had learned something valuable about the diversity of intelligence and the many different paths that development could take. They'd learned that strength comes in many forms, and that cooperation often produces better results than competition. And Marcus was pretty sure that lesson would serve them all well as they prepared to become the next generation of galactic leaders, scientists and explorers. After all, the galaxy was a big place with room for many different kinds of intelligence, and if humans had taught them anything, it was that diversity of thought and approach made everyone stronger. The teasing had stopped, but the real education was just beginning.